Do you need a portable bandsaw even if you have a chop saw? The short answer, yes. This is the Milwaukee Model 2929, and it's the M18 Fuel Deep Cut Bandsaw. It will cut up to 5 inches in depth as well as 5 inches in width. Is it their first 5-inch by 5-inch portable bandsaw? No. This is Generation 2. It's faster, it's lighter, and it's even more powerful. This is the Milwaukee M18 Fuel Deep Cut Bandsaw. Now, this is not the first go-around of the M18 Deep Cut. They had a previous model, but this is better, faster, as well as lighter. I don't think it's smaller. I think it's about the same size. But it is, I think, somewhere around a pound and a half, maybe even almost 2 pounds lighter than the previous version, but still supposed to be faster and more powerful, and with maybe even a couple more options on here. Now, you can get this in the model that you see here, which is the 2929-20. You can also get it in a kit form, which would be the 2929-22. But you can also get this in a dual trigger format. In other words, where there's a trigger here, like we see here, and then there's a secondary trigger up here on your auxiliary handle or your secondary handle where your second hand goes to. So, in other words, for a safety form factor, in fact, many facilities like to see that, where you have to have both hands on the tool in order to actually activate the bandsaw. Now, this being a deep cut, at the time that Milwaukee released their previous version, it was the only 5-inch deep and 5-inch wide portable bandsaw at the time. There may be some others out there with it, but we still get that same capacity, meaning a full 5 inches of width as well as a full 5 inches of depth as well. Let's go ahead and dive into the cutting, and then we'll come back and talk about features and all that other stuff. And if you want to skip to that first, you can do so, but let's go ahead and get to the action. What we've got set up in the vise here is a piece of round tubing that is 4.5 inches outside diameter and about 3/8 of an inch thick. So I believe that's Schedule 80 4.5 inch pipe. Make a couple of cuts on this and see how it does. I'm going to be in mode 3 on this. And let's go ahead and slide down the shoe. A little help bracing on that. So you can see I had plenty enough width and slop in there to make that cut, plenty of that depth to make that cut as well, even on that 4.5 inch Schedule 80 pipe. Now I'm going to turn on our blade stop mode, or whatever that mode is. There we go. I'll turn that on and then see if we get a little different action here. So you see my finger is still on this trigger, and it actually stopped the blade. If you noticed on the first one, I laid into it pretty good. You could hear me putting pressure on it, the motor slowing down, and me letting pressure back up, motor speeding up. So I was trying to really give it some, lay into it to cut faster and to see if I could actually shut it off. I could definitely slow it down, but if you just let it cut, it's going to cut. And by the way, are you in the arena of thinking that lube on a bandsaw will help cut faster? Let's see. A little cutting oil. Oops. Little bind there. All right, let's finish this cut. Okay, let me give you 2 tips. Probably something you already know. Number 1, lube is almost always going to be faster on any type of cut because it just keeps the friction down, and it also keeps everything cool. Mainly keeps it cool. Also will make the blade last longer. That's why most of your big bandsaws have fluid built into the system. Anyway, so lube is always going to be faster. However, if you noticed, on this big deep cut bandsaw, when I removed one hand to start spraying with a little lubricant while I was making the cut, what happened? I binded or bound or whatever the bandsaw blade, and it actually jumped track on it. And so that was totally my mistake on that, not the tool. Again, as you notice, it was when I went to one hand. So something got a little wonky, a little top heavy on this, trying to make a cut, deep in the cut, and then just a little twist, and it's going to, something's got to give. So keep 2 hands on a deep cut bandsaw. It's one thing if you've got a little porta band, a little one-handed, those are great, cutting conduit, things like that. But when you get into cutting Schedule 40, 1/4-inch wall, angle iron, 1/4-inch walls, tubing, that's when you need to keep 2 hands on the tool so that you can guide it. Okay, so we talked about the 5-inch by 5-inch capacity, but let's go ahead and throw the band on there, or the blade on there. And by the way, you have totally toolless blade changing. All you have to do is swing this arm right here. You can get this tool, it doesn't come with them, but you can get them with covers that basically just slide on each end here. Otherwise, kind of the bottom or the opposite side is kind of open, and something that's not required at all. But to put these on is pretty easy. First, we're just going to take our little arm right here and open it all the way up. And that should enable us to not only get it around our pulleys here, and by the way, make sure you put the teeth up. And in so doing, let's talk about the blade. The blade is a 810 TPI, so it means it's kind of a variation of 8 to 10 teeth per inch, so 8 to 10 TPI. Obviously, TPI meaning teeth per inch. You also get right here on the saw are these dual bearings on each post here. So we have 2 bearings here, 2 bearings here, and on the other side as well. Both on the power side as well as on the non-powered side, we have bearings that are going to keep everything nice and true to running, so the band doesn't want to walk all over the place. It's going to run in between those guys, and it's going to be very important to keep those in there. Also, there's a bearing down here in the bottom that it rides on as well, which is where this blade is going to kind of press against when you're cutting on something. So very important to get this thing set up nice and true from the start. And by the way, you want to make sure that you're using some cut resistance gloves when you're doing this, because this blade will eat you up. So again, make sure that your blade is all the way seated down into those bearings or those rollers. Make sure they're seating on that bottom one as well. Make sure they're seated all the way on these little pulleys here. And I can see that I've already messed something up. So you'll see here, there's a rubber band, not a rubber band, but a rubber band that goes all the way around this pulley, has little teeth on that pulley, and I have actually pushed that rubber off of that with the blade. So we pull this blade back off, and again, I'll make sure that my lever is all the way loose. So a little manipulation from a couple of screwdrivers, and we have that rubber banding back on there. So very important, make sure that everything's seated nice and that the blade's on properly. So let's go at this one more time. Also make sure your teeth are on the proper way. So on these pulleys here, on these rollers, you'll see that there's an arrow, so it spins this way, which you want the teeth going against that. So I do know this is the correct way. Again, I want to make sure that my lever is all the way open. So now I've just got a little bit of tension on my lever over here to make sure that everything's on properly. And I can see the blade is sunk down a little bit right there, but everywhere else in right there, it's not really seated all the way into that roller. There we go, I got that seated. Now I'm going to go ahead and crank this down. I'm throwing my battery and carefully just kind of bump this a little bit. And now we should be good everywhere. Yeah, it's right on the edge of both of those rollers. It's deep down into these bearings here and seated down on the bottom bearing. So now we're good to go with the blade. Perfect. You'll also notice right here we get a brush that kind of helps keep debris off of that rubber roller, which is kind of the drive gear. And you'll notice this little kind of funky thing right here that's not on this end. And what this is for is actually for deburring pipe, conduit, things like that. You can get attachments that actually clip onto there, and you can use this for deburring. You know, once you cut with a bandsaw your conduit, you can deburr it with the same tool. You don't have to break out a different tool, and it just kind of sits and locks onto that hub. And as I mentioned, you can also get covers that slide onto each way of this. Now, overall length of this, going to be kind of funky to measure this, but just to kind of give you an idea, looks like right at 20 inches long. As far as height goes with the battery, looks like right at 1 foot, a little over 12 inches, maybe 12¼ inches to the top of the battery. And as far as thickness of the unit, it's not much at all, probably just a couple of inches, and that shouldn't really get in your way much until you're starting to do diagonal cuts, things like that. But that's where you're just going to have to feel it out and know how much of an angle you can do. I do know you can literally get a 5-inch wide and a 5-inch deep cut. Now you'll notice on here that we get a rafter hook that's built onto it that folds up out of the way. We also get a tether or lanyard loop as well, so already on the machine. And we can hook to that if we need to. We get a locking trigger, so you can push it this way and it actually locks it so you cannot use it. Push it the other way and obviously then you can use it. Now the cool thing about this trigger is that it's a variable speed trigger, as well as we have 3 speed modes. So if you look down in here, you have speed 1, 2, and 3. Maximum speed is 550 SFPM. In other words, 550 surface feet per minute is the blade speed. Now that's in mode 3. In mode 1, you're going to get up to 315 SFPM, or 315 surface feet per minute would be the max. And in speed 2, you're going to get up to 430 surface feet per minute. And, you know, if we have it in, say, speed 2 with a max of 430, we can still start it very slow and ease into it. So even though we may have max speed set, we can still start it much slower, much like a drill or impact driver, where we can start those slower to get the cut going and then speed that up to the max RPM, or the max surface feet per minute. Also, we have this auto blade stop mode, and let me so you just hold the mode button down and you'll get the green light here as well as your speed button, so 1, 2, and 3, so you can enable this blade stop in any of these speeds. And all that's going to do is when you finish your cut, it will automatically shut off the tool. And I think I can even fool it right here. Let me see if I can do so. So I've got it in blade stop mode. I'm just going to ease into the RPM and then go fast. Yeah, there we go. And so it literally shut off. My finger's still on the trigger. We'll show that in some cuts as well. But basically it senses when there's no load on the tool and it shuts it back down because it knows it's done with the cut. Also, we get an LED light that shines directly down there on the cut. I've said this before on bandsaws. Sometimes, there's some tools that where LED lights are on that just doesn't make a lot of sense. I think it makes a lot of sense for a bandsaw, because many times you're trying to see a cut line, you're working with rusty metal, and you've marked it with a pen or a pencil or a soapstone or whatever, and it's hard to see anyway. So anything to get a little more light on that area to be able to see that, hey, I'm all for that. Also, this shoe here, you can see right now it's tucked away into the tool, if you will. No tools needed. Just push this little lever right here and slide it down. So you can slide that down, and now you've got that kind of a stop to rest against, or a blade rest, if you will. Also, if you wanted to chuck this up into some vise, now you've got a little bit of a floor if you're cutting, you know, little pieces of sheet metal, 1/8 inch metal, 3/4 inch or 1/4 inch metal, things like that, where you're cutting some different little fab pieces or whatever. You can use it for that also. Now, they also claim with a 5 amp hour XC battery that you can get up to 78 cuts with one charge. What they're talking about is 1 5/8 inch unistrut. So if you're typically doing construction and, you know, hanging electrical, hanging plumbing, things like that, sprinklers, then, you know, your understanding of 1 5/8 inch unistrut. And so supposedly you can cut 78 pieces. Now, the rest of the world, you know, how many cuts are you going to get? Well, that's really dependent upon, you know, how thick is the metal and what are you cutting? How big is it? But anyway, you're still going to get a lot of cuts even off 150 battery. And if you want to step up to a, you know, an 80 or a 90 or even a 12 battery, obviously you're going to get more capacity and longer run time. Now, just to give you an idea, if we can get a measurement on this, or a weight on it. Yeah, 12 pounds, 2.5 ounces with the 50 battery on. So we gave you the full skinny while we were cutting, when we actually let the bandsaw actually grab, or actually let the blade grab and actually jerk it off the wheels, because we were cutting with one hand. Otherwise, as we mentioned, anytime you can add lube to a cutting surface or to a cutting wheel or a cutting blade or what have you, typically you're going to get better performance and more longevity out of the blade. However, you can't do it at the cost of then, you know, creating more havoc on your blade and breaking some teeth or breaking a blade, which is the potential of what we did, as well as the safety aspect. So highly recommend, especially on a deep cut bandsaw, keep both hands on it while you're cutting to keep it nice and stable and cutting through. I also mentioned this, when you want to put some power to it or lay some weight to it and get it to cut a little faster, you can do that and you will hear it slow down. But I did not get it to stop. I didn't necessarily try to get it to stop, but I was putting some firm pressure on it. At the same time, you can back off of it and just kind of let it use its own weight to cut through, and it will do that at a higher speed as well. The auto stop function definitely works. As soon as it got down with the cut, shut the tool off. Basically, it's sensing a load. If it doesn't have a load, it's saying, okay, I'm done cutting, shut the saw off. And that's great for, again, in those larger capacity cuts. And when you're getting through, you're not getting into some kind of havoc where the blade bites on something else and, you can't get your hand off the trigger or whatever that may be. Now let's talk about price on this. Pricing on this is like $379 for the bare tool. So as you see it here without this battery is $379. Now, if you get the 2929-22, -20 would be the bare tool, -22 would be the kit that also includes two 5.0 batteries. That's going to run you about $300 more at $669, so $290 more. So $379 for the bare tool, $669 for the tool with the two 5 amp hour batteries and the charger. If you want the dual trigger design, then that's going to run you $429 for the bare tool and $729 for the kit. You get a 5-year warranty on whichever you purchase, whether you buy the bare tool, the kit, the dual trigger, not the dual trigger. You're going to get a 5-year warranty on the tool. So we think this is a great tool, especially if you're cutting thicker stuff, bigger stuff. Definitely reach for a deep cut bandsaw. Is it going to do everything that your chop saw can do? Not necessarily, but will it do things that your chop saw won't do? Absolutely, especially things like out in the field. There's sometimes that you just can't get a chop saw in places like this where you have a flange or a table or something connected and you need to get a bandsaw in there to cut it. I think everybody that's worked in fabrication understands sometimes the necessity of a Sawzall or even a Portaband like this is definitely a huge value. So be sure to check it out for yourself. We think it's a great tool. Also keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even TikTok. If you don't mind, hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And by all means, if you hated our video, well, give us a thumbs down. But would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day and keep smiling.